He said, "Just wait outside for a bit, Mom. We're not ready yet." So I stood there, holding my homemade apple pie on the concrete step beside their door. The porch light hadn't been turned on. It was getting dark, and the November wind slipped through my coat like water through a sieve. I held the pie tighter, still warm. I could feel it through the towel I'd wrapped around the dish. My fingers ached from the cold. I waited, and then, through the window, I saw them. Laughter, forks clinking, plates already served. Lauren was passing a bowl of salad to Emma, my granddaughter. Paul was pouring wine. The candles on the table flickered gold. They were all there. Except me. I didn't drop the pie. I didn't knock. I didn't call his name. I turned around, went down the steps slowly, and walked to the curb. I didn't even cry. Not then. My eyes just burned. The kind of burn you get when you've looked at something too long and too hard. I drove back home in silence. The road was familiar. I'd lived in this neighborhood 42 years. Every turn was muscle memory. Paul had been born in this very house. Learned to ride his bike on Sycamore Street. Built a treehouse in our backyard, though that tree had been cut down years ago. I parked in front of the house. It looked smaller now, as if each year without George had shaved off a little more of its sturdiness. The porch steps sagged slightly. One of the gutters was hanging loose again. I'd asked Paul to help fix it last spring, and he'd said, "Sure, next weekend." That was 8 months ago. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and old wood. I put the pie down on the counter. The towel was damp with steam. I unwrapped it carefully, like a bandage, and placed the dish on the stovetop. It was a good pie, my best in months. I stood there in the kitchen, not moving, not thinking, just letting the silence press against me. Then, slowly, I went to the hallway and took off my coat. My hands were trembling now, not from cold, from knowing, really knowing. He hadn't forgotten. It wasn't a mistake. I hadn't misheard. He'd told me to wait outside, because he didn't want me inside. I sat down in the living room, the same beige armchair George used to fall asleep in during football games. I leaned my head back and stared at the ceiling. Why? That was the question that kept echoing, like a loose window rattling in a storm. Why would your own son ask you to wait outside while he celebrates with his family? Why would he hide you? I'd raised him alone after George passed, paid for his school, skipped meals some months so he could join that summer science program, sold my wedding ring to help with his first car down payment. He never knew that part. And when he met Lauren, I was the one who helped them with their mortgage, their wedding, the baby's crib. And now, this. I stood up, walked to the side table and opened the drawer. The phone lay there, old, scratched. I scrolled to Paul's name, stared at it. I didn't call. I couldn't. What would I say? Why didn't you let me in, son? And what if he said something like, "It wasn't personal, Mom," or worse, "We thought you'd be uncomfortable." As if my presence was a complication to be managed. Instead, I opened the bottom drawer where I kept receipts and records. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof that I existed in their life. Bank transfers. Notes from Lauren, little drawings from Emma. Something to anchor me. What I found was the receipt from their roof repair. $5,000. Paid in full by me. And the thank you text from Paul. "You're a lifesaver, Mom. Don't know what we'd do without you." That was 3 years ago. I leaned against the drawer, breathing slowly. No, tonight wasn't a mistake. They were ready. Just not for me. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I sat in that same chair till morning, watching the shadows move across the floor. Around 4 a.m., I got up and put the pie in the fridge. By 6, I'd already boiled water, made tea, and fed the cat. Even though he hadn't meowed yet, my hands needed something to do. Anything. By 8, I had a plan. I started with the messages. My son never deletes anything. Neither do I. I pulled out my phone, went to our last thread. The invite had been casual. Dinner's at 6. Just come by the house. Bring pie if you feel like it. No mention of a party. No talk of guests. Certainly nothing about a reservation list or a table set for 10. Without me. I scrolled back further. Weeks, then months. Little patterns started to appear. Requests. Favors. Mom, can you drop off the kids on Tuesday? Mom, we're short on rent this month. Just $100, I swear. Could you drive Lauren to the dentist? Always polite. Always appreciative. But always one way. I never asked for anything. Not once. The last time Paul came over without needing something was Emma's 2nd birthday. He'd brought balloons and a crayon drawing she made of Grandma's house. That picture used to be on my fridge, but the colors faded. It fell off one day, and I didn't bother putting it back. I closed the messages and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. My face looked older than it had last week. Strange how a single night can do that to you. Later that morning, I called Lauren. Just to be sure. Just to see if maybe, Paul had gone off script and she didn't know. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. "Oh, hi, Mary," she said, sounding surprised. "Good morning, Lauren. Just checking in. I stopped by last night." A pause. Too long. I could hear a coffee machine whirring in the background. "Oh, yeah. Paul said you dropped by. Sorry about that. Things were kind of crazy, you know." I didn't answer. She filled the silence. "We just had a few friends over, low-key, nothing fancy." "Looked nice," I said flatly. "Through the window, I mean." She laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess it did get a little festive." "I saw everyone," I said. "Emma, the Petersons, your sister, the wine, the cake, all 10 of you." Silence. Then, "It wasn't personal, Mary. We just thought it might be better if—" "Better for who?" I asked. Not angry, just asking. She exhaled. "Paul didn't want to overwhelm you. He said you've been tired lately, that your knees—" "My knees are fine." I could hear her swallowing. "Look, I'm sorry, really." I hung up before she could say anything else. The phone rang almost immediately, but I didn't pick up. Not that time, not for that. Instead, I went to the kitchen and took out a notebook, the blue one with the frayed edge. I've used it for years to track bills, medication schedules, birthdays. But that morning, I used it for something else. I wrote down every dollar I'd given Paul in the last 10 years. I started with the house. When they were short on the down payment, I pulled from George's life insurance. Then came the car. When Lauren's broke down. Then the braces for Emma. The school fundraiser. The broken furnace. The trip to Tahoe. The new mattress. The emergency vet bill for their dog. The list took 6 pages. I added it up. Carefully. Twice. $74,380. I underlined the number, then closed the book. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just awake. People will take what you give. It's not cruelty, always. Sometimes it's habit. But one day when you stop giving, you find out what they really think of you. That day had come. I spent the next day in silence. Not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that falls over a house when every room holds a question you don't want to answer. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't check the mail. just moved slowly from room to room, noticing everything I'd once overlooked. The crack in the hallway tile, the picture frames slightly crooked, the armrest of George's recliner, worn smooth from years of his hand. That chair hadn't been sat in since he passed. I kept meaning to give it away, but something in me couldn't. It was the last thing in this house that still felt like him. Mid-morning, I called my bank. "Good morning, this is Chase National," said the young woman, too cheerful for my mood. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to cancel the automatic transfers on my account." "All of them." She paused. "All of them?" "Yes, the ones marked to Paul G. and Lauren T. Thornley." She asked for my verification details. I gave them. Then I waited as she clicked through whatever screens she needed to. "I see 4 recurring transfers," she said. "1 for mortgage assistance, 1 for private school tuition, and 2 for miscellaneous payments." "I want them all stopped," I said. "Immediately?" "Yes, and I want a printed statement of the last 3 years mailed to me." There was another pause. "Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else I can do for you today?" "No," I said. "You've done more than enough." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from doubt. From adrenaline. I went into my bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept all my old documents. The manila envelopes marked legal, insurance, wills. I hadn't looked at George's will in years. He'd written it simple and straight. Left everything to me. "I trust your judgment, Mary," he'd said at the time, his voice soft but certain. "You'll know what to do when the time comes." Back then, I thought he meant the practical things: taxes, plumbing, property. Now I understood. He meant the hard things, the things you can't fix with a wrench or a checkbook. I put the will aside and took out my own. It was outdated. Last revised in 2009. It named Paul as the primary executor and beneficiary. Emma was listed too, but only in a small clause. Lauren wasn't mentioned. Back then I thought that was generous, simple. Now it felt careless. I called Mr. Langston, my attorney. "Mary, it's been a while." "Yes," I said. "But I think it's time we updated a few things." He didn't ask questions, just gave me an appointment for Monday morning. I hung up and let myself breathe for the first time in 2 days. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. I didn't check the caller ID. I knew who it was. "Mom," Paul said, trying to sound casual. "I heard you spoke to Lauren." "Yes. She's upset." "I imagine she is." There was silence on the line. Then, "You're not answering your messages." I didn't think there was anything left to say. He sighed. "Look, I know it didn't look great, but we weren't trying to hurt you. You just didn't want me there. That's not fair. You told me to wait outside." He hesitated. "You came too early." "Paul," I said, my voice flat. There was a toast. Candles. The cake had already been cut. More silence. I waited. He didn't deny it. "You could have just told me," I said, "that you didn't want me there, that I wasn't part of the celebration." "That's not what it was," he said, but the words had no weight. "It was complicated. You've been tired. You said your hip's been acting up. We didn't want to stress you." I didn't answer. Finally, he added, "We were going to come by this weekend. Bring you leftovers." Emma made a card. A pause. He was waiting for gratitude, for forgiveness, for me to say, "That's sweet of her." But I didn't. "Don't bother," I said quietly. "I already cleaned out the fridge." I hung up. It felt like cutting a rope, one I'd been gripping for years, one I didn't realize was choking me. The office smelled like lemon polish and old books. Mr. Langston hadn't changed much. His hair had thinned, his belly rounded slightly. but his eyes were just as sharp as ever. When he stood to greet me, he did it with the kind of formality you don't see often anymore, as if my arrival actually mattered. "Mary," he said warmly, "it's good to see you." "And you," I replied, meaning it. He gestured for me to sit, then closed the door behind us. No interruptions. That was one of the things I appreciated about him. He always made space, no matter how small the matter. I handed him my old will. "It needs revising." He took it without comment, slipping on his glasses and skimming the contents. Then, looking over the frames, he asked, "Do you know what you want to change?" "I want Paul removed as executor," I said. "And beneficiary?" He nodded slowly. "Understood. Do you want to name someone else?" "My granddaughter, Emma. She's still young, but I trust her more than I trust her parents." He didn't blink, just reached for a clean sheet of paper and began writing. "And the house? It stays in a trust. In my name, no transfers, no co-signing, no power of attorney." His pen scratched across the paper like a verdict. "And the savings? I'd like to leave a small scholarship fund in George's name for local students, kids with single mothers." He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "That's generous." "It's justice," I said. "George believed in hard work. So did I. It shouldn't go to people who only remember me when their car breaks down." He smiled faintly, and I felt the warmth of being seen. It took over an hour to finalize everything. He walked me through the paperwork carefully, like always, making sure I understood every clause. When I signed the last document, he slid it into a folder and said, "You've just drawn a new line, Mary." "I know." "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded. "It doesn't hurt." I left his office lighter than I'd felt in weeks. The sun was shining low, throwing long shadows across the pavement. I stopped at the bakery on the way home, not out of habit, but because I wanted to. Bought myself a single slice of cherry pie, George's favorite. Back home, I sat on the porch and ate it with a plastic fork. The air was cold but clean. I watched the neighborhood, the dogs barking, the kids coming back from school, the mailman waving as he passed. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like the house was mine again. Not something I was guarding for others, not a storage unit for their memories, but mine. That evening, I turned off my phone. Let them wonder. The first call came Tuesday evening. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Old habit. "Mom?" Paul. His voice was tight, like a man trying to sound calm with a fist clenched in his pocket. "I heard you changed your will." "I did," I said, plain and simple. A pause. "Without telling me?" "It's my will, Paul. I don't need permission." Silence. Then a sigh. Not of sadness, of calculation. "Look," he said, "if this is about Friday, it's not just about Friday." He hesitated. "You're upset. That's understandable. But maybe we should talk before making rash decisions." "I didn't make any rash decisions," I said, my voice even. "They've been years in the making. I just finally acted." Another pause. "You're being dramatic." That made me laugh. Not loudly, not with humor, just a dry, quiet sound. "No, Paul. Dramatic would have been me showing up at your dinner party and flipping the cake onto the carpet." "Mom, I sat outside your house holding a pie I made for your family while you raised a glass without me. That's not drama. That's clarity." His tone shifted, trying to soften. "You know we love you." "I don't know that," I said. "I know you love what I provide." The line went quiet again. "Emma was really upset when she heard," he said finally, like it was a trump card. "She's the only one who isn't cut out of anything," I said. "Maybe ask yourself why." I hung up before he could speak again. I wasn't in the mood for explanations that ended in guilt. An hour later, Lauren texted, "You're punishing us. That's not fair." I didn't reply. Fair was me co-signing a loan for their business idea that failed within 6 months. Fair was sitting through 3 Christmas dinners where I wasn't allowed to bring up George because it made things too heavy. Fair had run out of gas a long time ago. The next day, Thea, my neighbor's daughter, came over to bring me some tomatoes from their garden. We sat on the porch, sipping tea. She's in her 20s, still figuring life out, but there's something grounding about her presence. She listens with both ears. "Can I ask you something?" she said, curling her hands around her mug. "What made you do it? Change everything now?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "There's a line between love and usefulness," I said. "And when you start feeling like a utility, not a person, it's time to reevaluate." She nodded slowly. "Sounds lonely." "Sometimes it is," I admitted. "But being surrounded by people who only see your worth in what you give, that's lonelier." She was quiet for a while, then said, "My mom always says dignity's not loud. It just doesn't bend." I smiled. She's right. That evening, I found Emma's card in the mailbox. No return address, just her handwriting. Inside was a drawing, a tiny house with flowers, a big sun, and a gray-haired woman sitting on the porch with a pie on her lap. Underneath, in her teenage cursive, "I saw you, Grandma. I wanted you there." No apology, no plea, just presence. I pressed the card to my chest and exhaled. Monday morning came with rain. The sky was low and sullen, and the gutters overflowed again. That same one Paul never fixed. I didn't rush. I made my tea, buttered some toast, fed Jasper the cat. I wasn't going to let this new chapter begin in a hurry. I'd lived too long in a rush to please other people. By 10, I was in Mr. Langston's office again, going over the final documents. He explained each clause carefully, as if I were a first-time buyer, instead of a woman who had paid off 3 mortgages in her lifetime. "The trust is now active," he said, tapping the folder. "Everything, house, savings, even your jewelry, remains in your name, with clear instructions on succession. No one can alter it without your consent or a court order, and Emma is listed as the successor trustee." I nodded, hands folded in my lap. "If anyone pressures you to change it, you call me. Day or night." "I will. And the medical directive?" "Signed," I said. "If I'm not able to make my own decisions, Emma decides. Not Paul, not Lauren." He gave me a long look, part concern, part admiration. "You're doing this with a steady hand, Mary. No anger, just clarity." "I'm too old for tantrums," I said, "but not too old for dignity." On the way home, I stopped by the library. It was mostly empty, save for the high school students dragging their feet through history projects and a few retirees nodding off in the armchairs. I wasn't here for books, not this time. Emma was working the front desk, her part-time job. I waited until the line cleared, then walked up. She saw me and smiled. Wide, genuine. "Grandma." "I got your card," I said. "Thank you." She looked sheepish, lowering her voice. "Dad was mad I sent it." "I know. I didn't agree with what they did. I told them that. Mom said I didn't understand the bigger picture. But I think sometimes the bigger picture is just people being cowards." I smiled. "You see more than they think." We talked for a few minutes about school, her biology teacher, the books she was sneaking home from the banned shelf. Then she leaned in and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" I looked at her. Really looked. She had George's eyes. Not just the color, but the calm way they held you when you spoke. I am now, I said. She nodded, understanding something deeper than I had words for. If you ever need anything, really anything, call me first. Before Dad. I will. Before I left, I slipped a small envelope into her palm. Inside was a note. You are the only one I trust to hold the key. One day this house will be yours. Not for what you've done, but for who you are. She read it there at the counter, eyes welling. But she didn't cry. She just nodded. Okay, she whispered. When I stepped back into the rain, it didn't feel so heavy. Emma came by that Saturday with a bag of groceries and no announcement. She just showed up, her hoodie soaked from the rain, hair pulled into a messy bun. When I opened the door, she lifted the bag like it was an offering. Grandma, she said, you didn't have milk, and I know you hate going out when it's wet. I let her in without a word. Some things don't need thanking, not right away. We put the groceries away together. She knew where everything went. That alone said something. She'd been watching, paying attention. When the kitchen was quiet again, she sat down at the table and looked at me. Really looked. Can I ask you something? She said. I nodded. Why now? Her voice wasn't demanding, just curious. Why not 5 years ago? Or 10? I sat down across from her and folded my hands. Because I still believed I mattered to them, that one day they'd see me again, not as an obligation, not as a resource, but as a person, a mother. She was quiet for a while, then said, I think they do see you, but only through the lens of what you've always been. Reliable. Always there. Always fixing things. It's hard to imagine you doing anything else. That's the problem, I said. They don't imagine. They just expect. Emma chewed on her lip, thinking. I remember once. I asked Dad where your bedroom was in our old house, and he laughed and said, wherever the bills are kept. I didn't get it then, but I do now. That stung more than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it sounded so casual. Like that's just who I was to him. A ledger, a line of credit. Do you think I did something wrong? I asked her quietly. She shook her head. I think you did too much right. For too long. They forgot you had the option to say no. I looked at her then. This young woman with sharp eyes and a too big heart. She wasn't on my side because of obligation. She was here because she'd chosen to be. I want you to promise me something, I said. Anything. When I'm gone, no guilt. No rewriting. You'll tell the truth. About what happened. About who came and who didn't. About how I chose to live the end of my life. Emma reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold from the rain, but her grip was steady. I promise. We sat there a while, just holding hands, not talking. The clock ticked softly in the hallway. Jasper patted in and curled at Emma's feet, as if he knew the moment was gentle. When she left, I stood at the window and watched her walk to her car. She didn't look back. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't have to. She knew I was there, that I'd always be there. Not out of habit, but out of choice. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. I woke early the next morning, long before the sun rose. Not from pain, not from dreams, just a kind of alertness I hadn't felt in years. The house was still, but not empty. It breathed with me now. I made oatmeal the way George liked it. Plain, no sugar. I sat at the table, spoon in hand, and let my mind drift. It's strange, what memory chooses to keep. I remembered a day from decades ago, maybe 1976. George had just fixed the old Chevy, and Paul was 5, sitting cross-legged on the front lawn with a popsicle. We'd just gotten our first real washing machine. I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window, thinking, this is it. This is what life is. And it was. Not grand, not dramatic. Just good. Honest. Paid for with small sacrifices and long days, and I was proud of that. Still am. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a woman and became a service. A chauffeur, a babysitter, a checkbook with an apron. I don't say that with bitterness, just fact. They never asked who I wanted to be once I stopped being necessary. They never asked what I missed, or what I dreamed about, or whether I got lonely at night in a house that used to echo with laughter. Paul never asked how I slept after George died, whether the silence in the bedroom felt like mercy or punishment. He didn't ask what I did with my wedding ring when the bills came due and there was no one left to ask. I sold it. Quietly. To a pawn shop on 8th Street. The man gave me $200 and a look I won't forget. Not pity, not kindness. Just indifference. That ring paid for Paul's textbooks his first semester. He never knew. I don't tell you this to shame him, only to say I did my part. I gave. I carried. I stayed quiet so they could feel loud. Now I'm quiet, because I choose to be. After breakfast, I walked to the garden. The roses were mostly gone, but the lavender still clung to life. I knelt slowly, tugging at a stubborn weed, and thought about the women I knew growing up. My mother, her sisters, the neighbor who used to make apple jelly and kept 3 husbands buried in the same cemetery. Those women didn't complain. They endured, with their backs straight and their words few. But I wonder now, how many of them died with clenched jaws, full of stories they never told. I won't be one of them. Later that day, I found an old box in the attic. Inside were photographs, letters, a few of George's cufflinks, and a small notebook. Mine, from before Paul was born. I opened it slowly, like a letter from someone I'd forgotten to answer. Page after page, I saw a woman with plans, a list of cities I wanted to visit, recipes to try, poems I copied by hand, even a sketch of a garden with benches drawn in shaky pencil. I'd forgotten her. She wasn't practical. She wasn't patient. But she was alive. I closed the notebook gently and brought it downstairs. Set it beside the teapot. I think I'll plant new lavender next spring, maybe even paint the porch. For no one's comfort but my own. It was a Thursday when Paul showed up. No call, no text. Just his car pulling into the driveway like it always had. Only this time, I didn't feel the usual mix of hope and dread. I felt ready. I watched from the kitchen window as he sat there a moment, engine running, eyes fixed ahead. Then he got out slowly, like a man walking into uncertain weather. He had something in his hands, a folder, thick with papers. He knocked, polite. I opened the door but didn't move aside. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Paul?" He hesitated, then lifted the folder. "Can we talk?" I looked at him for a long moment, then stepped back. 10 minutes, I said. Not because I owe you, just because I'm not afraid of you. He walked in like a man stepping onto foreign land. His eyes flicked around the room, maybe looking for signs of warmth or signs of absence. He sat at the table. I stayed standing. I wanted to clear a few things up, he began. I feel like this has gotten way out of hand. No, I said. It's finally in hand. Mine. He looked stung, but recovered quickly. Always did have that lawyer's tone, even as a child. Logical, mild, persuasive. We never meant to exclude you. That dinner wasn't a statement. It was last minute. I said nothing. He shifted. And Lauren, she feels terrible. She's been crying, actually. Let her cry, I said softly. She's good at it. He blinked. You're being cold. No, I said. I'm being correct. He opened the folder then, spreading out some papers, bank statements, schedules, an old printout of my will. Look, I know you've changed some things. That's your right. But I think maybe we acted too fast. There's no need to be punitive. We can talk this through. There's nothing to talk through, I said. I already did the talking for 30 years. You just didn't hear it. He frowned. What are you trying to prove? That I'm still here, I said. That I see what's real. That I won't let my last years be spent waiting outside like a delivery. He looked genuinely hurt then, but not in a way that made me soften. In a way that showed me he still didn't get it. I've given you everything, I said. Not just money, time, silence. My good name when you needed a cosigner. My Sundays when you needed a sitter. My pride when you needed help and couldn't bear to ask out loud. He rubbed his face, eyes suddenly older than I remembered. So that's it? He said. You're cutting us off? No, I said. I'm cutting myself loose. He looked down at the folder, then gathered the papers back into it, slow and clumsy. You always said family was everything, he muttered. And I meant it, I said, but not at the cost of myself. He stood, folder under one arm. I wish you'd told me sooner. I did, I said. You just didn't hear it through the sound of your own needs. He didn't hug me. He didn't cry. He didn't even say goodbye. He just left. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. By myself. 2 days later, I had lunch with Lorraine. We'd known each other since the 70s. Back when we both had toddlers in tow and hips that didn't ache every time it rained. She still lived 3 streets over, in the same red brick bungalow with the green shutters and wind chimes that never stopped singing, even in dead air. She brought soup. I made sandwiches. We sat in the sunroom with blankets over our knees, as 2 old women do, and talked around the edges of what mattered, until we didn't. I heard Paul came by, she said, not looking at me. He did. She sipped her tea. And? I let him talk. I didn't let him change anything. A small smile tugged at her mouth. Good. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. We were the kind of friends who understood each other's silences better than most people's explanations. I always wondered, she said quietly, if we did it wrong. This generation, if we made them too comfortable, too certain that we'd be there no matter what. I looked at her, surprised. Lorraine never spoke like that. Not in years. Not since her son put her in assisted care for 2 months without asking, just because his new wife needed space. You didn't do it wrong, I said. You just did it fully. And so did I. She nodded, eyes misting. Still hurts, though, doesn't it? Yes, but not in the way it used to. Not like a wound. More like a scar that tells you where not to lean anymore. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind chimes and the ticking clock. Then she said, You know what's wild? They think we're fragile. But we're the ones who survived everything. I smiled. We are the storm, not the roof. She laughed, a deep, warm sound. And for a moment we were 30 again, sharing crackers on the back porch, swatting away toddlers and mosquitoes. Before she left, she touched my hand and said, I'm proud of you. I didn't say thank you, just squeezed her fingers. That was enough. That evening, I sat by the window and watched the sky turn lavender. I thought about all the things I'd given away freely, and all the things I was finally learning to keep. Time, peace, my own story. They might not hear it. They might not like it. But it would be mine. It was nearly dusk when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd just poured a cup of chamomile and sat down with an old blanket and a mystery novel I'd read 3 times already. I moved slowly to the door, not with dread, just with a calm sort of resignation. I knew. Paul stood there, his jacket unzipped, eyes shadowed. He looked thinner somehow, or maybe just worn. "Can I come in?" I studied his face. There was no folder in his hands this time, no arguments ready behind his teeth. "All right," I said, "but just for a moment." He stepped in quietly, like he was entering a hospital room. His eyes drifted to the framed photo of George on the hallway table, then to the kitchen, where nothing had changed, but everything had shifted. We sat in the living room, him on the edge of the couch, me in my chair, a careful distance. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "That's good," I replied. "I'm all out of reasons to." He nodded slowly, ran a hand through his hair. "We're in trouble," he said. I didn't say anything. The business is folding, Lauren's cousin backed out of the funding, and we're months behind. There's debt. A lot of it. Still, I stayed quiet. He was testing the air, seeing where sympathy might rise. "And the mortgage," he continued. "We refinanced last year. Not that we told you. It's worse now. If we lose the house..." His voice cracked. Not in drama, in shame. "We'll have nowhere to go." I sipped my tea. It had cooled. "Why are you telling me this, Paul?" He looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Because I don't know who else to tell." I waited. He swallowed. "I know we've made mistakes. I know I have. And I know we took advantage of your kindness. I just..." He paused. The words wouldn't come easily to him. He'd spent too many years using charm instead of truth. "I thought you'd always be there," he said finally. "And then you weren't." I looked at him, this man I'd raised, this boy I once wrapped in towels after bath time, whose fevered forehead I once pressed against my cheek. "I was always there," I said. "Even when I shouldn't have been. And now I'm here, just not for your version of me." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I will listen. I will care. But I will not pay. Not anymore." He looked down at his hands, gripping his knees. "But what do we do?" he asked, and for the first time in years he sounded small. "You figure it out," I said. "Like I did. Like millions do. You don't need saving, Paul. You need to change." A long silence settled between us. "I was scared to come," he said. "I believe that. I thought you'd slam the door in my face. I thought about it." He let out a small, brittle laugh. "Emma said you wouldn't." My heart stirred at her name. "Emma sees more than either of us." He nodded. "She told me she's spending her next paycheck fixing the gutter here. Said it's not right you have to climb a ladder." "She's already more of a daughter than I ever had a son," I said, not cruelly, just truthfully. He winced, but he didn't argue. "I'll go," he said, standing. I wanted to tell you, we're not okay." I stood too, walked him to the door. When his hand touched the knob, I said quietly, "Paul?" He turned. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest." He nodded. Didn't say goodbye. Just left. I watched him walk to his car. He moved like a man who'd finally stopped pretending to float. I sat in the kitchen long after he left. The tea was cold. The clock ticked softly, marking time I wasn't spending chasing after anyone. I looked at the chair where Paul had sat, shoulders hunched, voice stripped of charm, and I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not triumph. Grief. Not for what I'd lost, but for what never really existed the way I thought it did. For the fantasy I'd built in the shape of a son who would return one day with thanks and recognition instead of debt and apology. The ache of letting that go was quiet, but deep. I stood up, poured the tea down the sink, and went to the back porch. The sky was darkening. Rain again, probably. I pulled my cardigan tighter and sat down, staring out at the half-dead lavender and the empty bird feeder. Then I thought of the bank account. There was still enough in there to help them. Not save them, I couldn't do that. But enough to buy time. Enough to stop a foreclosure. Maybe even keep the lights on while they figured things out. My fingers itched toward the checkbook, and then stopped. I sat with that feeling, the reflex to fix, to soothe, to rescue, and I watched it like a guest I didn't quite trust. How many times had I done this? Paid? Not because I believed in their choices, but because I couldn't bear their fear? Because I thought love meant always saying yes? But that wasn't love. That was guilt dressed in generosity. That was fear of being left out. Again. No more. I stood up, walked back into the house, and opened the drawer where the checkbook lived. Then I closed it. Instead, I wrote a letter. To Paul. I believe you when you say things are hard. I believe you didn't come here for money. Not only anyway. And I want to believe this is the start of something better. But I need you to do the work. On your own. The kind of work that doesn't come with a check attached. I have loved you beyond measure. I still do. But that love will no longer look like sacrifice. You are not alone. But you are responsible. That's what adulthood means. That's what I gave you. The right to stand on your own 2 feet. Use it. Mom. I sealed the envelope, left it on the table. I'd give it to Emma next time she visited. I trusted her to decide the right moment to hand it over. That night I slept with the windows open. The wind was strong, but not violent. It moved through the house like something being aired out, and for once I didn't worry about who might need me tomorrow. I had finally remembered what I needed today. The invitation came 3 days later, a cream-colored envelope tucked into the mailbox like it belonged there. No stamp, no address. Just my name, written in Paul's handwriting. Careful, too careful. Inside, a single card. Dinner. Saturday, 6 p.m. Just us. No guests, no surprises. We'd like to try again. Paul and Lauren. No explanation, no guilt, no demand. Just a quiet knock at the door, dressed as paper. I placed the card on the table and stared at it for a long time. I thought about the last time I stood at their doorstep, about the pie cooling in my hands, about the light from the windows, warm, full of people I thought were mine, about the sound of laughter I wasn't invited to. It wasn't fear I felt now, it was clarity. So I called Emma. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Grandma. I got an invitation. A pause. I figured they might try something. It's different this time. Is it? I'm going, I said, but on one condition. Name it. You drive me, and you walk me to the door. She didn't hesitate. Done. Saturday came soft and gray. Emma arrived early. She wore a simple dress and no makeup, just clean, steady eyes. The car ride was quiet, but not heavy. When we pulled into Paul's driveway, I saw the porch light was already on, the curtains drawn back, the door slightly open. We got out together. At the steps, I touched Emma's arm. Wait here. She nodded, hands folded in front of her like someone ready to speak at a memorial. I walked up the steps slowly. My knees ached. My back complained. But I moved like someone who had paid for every inch of ground beneath her feet. Paul opened the door before I could knock. He didn't smile. Neither did I. Inside, the table was set for 3. Just 3. No candles, no guests. The plates were plain, the wine unopened. It smelled like roasted chicken, not showy, just food. Lauren stood behind her chair, wringing a napkin. Paul gestured to mine. Please. I sat. They did too. For a moment, we just breathed, the kind of silence that comes before a verdict. Then Paul spoke. We wanted to say thank you for coming. I nodded once. Lauren cleared her throat. We know we hurt you, and we know sorry doesn't fix everything. No, I said. It doesn't. But we mean it, Paul added. And we're trying. We really are. I looked at him, at the fine lines that had deepened since last time, at the way his hands gripped the edge of the table. He looked like someone learning how to sit still with discomfort. That was new. I'm not here for apologies, I said. I've collected enough of those in my life to fill a library. They both stiffened slightly. I'm here, I continued, because I want to know if you see me now, not as a resource, not as background, but as a person, a woman, your mother. Paul swallowed. I think I'm starting to. Lauren nodded, eyes damp but quiet. Me too. I believed her, not fully, but enough. We ate in silence for a while. The food was decent. The wine stayed corked. Before dessert, I stood up. I won't stay long, I said. But I will say this, I have changed, and I won't change back. Paul looked up, eyes tired. We don't expect you to. I nodded. Good. Then I turned to go. At the door, I glanced back. You're not children anymore, and I'm not your net. I walked outside, down the steps, back into the night, where Emma stood waiting, not asking what had happened, just opening the car door like she already knew. We didn't speak in the car. Emma drove like she always did, careful, steady, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly in her lap. She didn't ask what they said. She didn't have to. The headlights swept across familiar houses, quiet lawns, and mailboxes painted with birds. I watched them pass one by one and thought, this is the road I've always taken. But now it feels different, because now I choose where it ends. Back home, I invited her in, not out of politeness, but because I wanted company, real company. She made the tea this time. She knew where everything was, the kettle, the sugar tin, the chipped blue mugs. Her hands moved like she belonged there. And maybe, finally, she did. We sat in the kitchen. I said, I didn't shout, I didn't accuse, I just said the truth. Emma nodded. That's enough. I told them they don't get the old me back, that she's gone. She needed to go, Emma said quietly. I looked at her then, really looked. Not as a child, not as someone to protect, but as an echo of all the women before me who were told to keep quiet, stay small, be grateful. I think I was waiting, I said, for someone to notice I was tired. Not physically, not the knees or the hips or the back, but tired of being mom without being Mary. Emma leaned forward, elbows on the table. They noticed, but they liked it better when you didn't speak up. That landed like a stone in still water, sharp, heavy, honest. I let it happen, I said. I trained them, really. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I bit my tongue instead of speaking. Every time I paid without pause. Emma didn't interrupt. She knew this wasn't confession. This was unburial. And somewhere along the way, I continued, I convinced myself that being useful was the same as being loved. Now she looked at me, not with pity, not with sadness, but with a kind of reverence I hadn't felt in years. You were loved, she said, but badly. That hit harder than I expected. I reached for her hand. She didn't flinch. They asked me to come back, I said, to the table, to the old dynamic, but softer this time. I think they mean it. I just don't know if I do. Emma looked at me steadily. You don't owe them anything, but if you go, it's because you want to, not because you're afraid not to. I nodded. It was never about the dinner. Not really. It was about being invisible in a room I helped build. And then, almost to myself, I won't sit quietly in a place where I have to prove I exist. We finished our tea. No more words were needed. Emma stayed the night. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She slept in the guest room. I left the hallway light on, like I used to when Paul was small. Not for comfort, for witness. Morning came slow and kind. Emma was still asleep when I woke, and the house was wrapped in that rare hush. Not empty, not lonely, just full of air that didn't ask anything of me. I made breakfast for one. Toast, soft eggs, coffee. I didn't miss the noise. I didn't miss the roles I used to play. I sat at the kitchen table, same chair as always, and thought, this is peace. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. But because I had stopped begging to be seen by people who only looked when they needed something. After breakfast, I walked the garden. It was early enough that the dew still clung to the grass. I checked the bird feeder, trimmed a few dead stems. The lavender was gone now, but something else was sprouting near the fence. I didn't know what it was yet, but I left it. Some things deserve a chance to become. Emma left around noon. She hugged me without speaking and said, before getting in the car, "You've changed everything, even if they don't know it yet." I smiled. They'll feel it eventually. After she drove off, I went to the drawer in the living room, the one I used to keep bills and receipts. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and sat down with a pen. This wasn't a will. It wasn't a ledger. It was a letter. Not to Paul, not to Lauren, not even to Emma. To whoever needed it. To whoever had waited outside too long with something warm in their hands and hope in their chest. If you're reading this, you're not invisible. Not to me. You don't have to keep proving yourself to people who only show up when they're empty and expect you to pour. You don't have to carry the weight just because you've always carried it. You don't have to call it love when it's really obligation. You don't have to be the good one, the quiet one, the one who says it's okay even when it isn't. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to want peace more than proximity. They may not understand it. They may call it cruelty. They may tell stories where you are the villain because they lost access, not because they lost you. Let them. You don't owe anyone your erasure. And if you're standing outside someone's door holding something you made with care and they don't open, leave it on the step, then walk away. You were never just the pie. You were always the guest. If this letter feels true to you, sign your name below. Not for them, for yourself. Sign it with your quiet, with your no, with your first full breath in years. And if it helps you breathe a little deeper, leave a comment. Share it. Pass it on. Let someone else know. We're not waiting outside anymore.